And we will see Kobe back on stage in a little bit. But first, I would like to introduce our second case. Hela Apparel Holdings is an apparel manufacturer with manufacturing facilities in Sri Lanka, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Egypt. Norfund invested in Hela at the start of this year with the aim of expanding Hela's operations in Kenya, contributing to the creation of jobs and industrial growth. However, the textile industry does have a reputation for bad ESG practices, including poor working conditions and high water and energy use. To shed some light on this industry and Hela's approach to addressing some of these challenges, please welcome to the stage Dilanka Jinadasa, Group CEO of Hela.
Thank you, Alida, for that kind introduction, and thank you, Norfund, for inviting me to speak at this forum. Before I start, I just want to quickly touch on this slide. Last night, there was a few mentions around the focus of Norfund, being around addressing poverty and, of course, sustainability. And I was very happy to see that because that's the exact same criteria that we have as a company. We call ourselves a social capital focused company with 3 key criteria around equity, inclusivity, and climate stability. And over the next few slides, I'll kind of touch on how we address those areas. But quickly, a quick recap around Hela. We generate about $300 million in revenue across the 4 countries that Alida mentioned. 10 manufacturing facilities, hiring about 17,000 employees. But this wasn't always the case. Just 10 years ago, back in 2012, we were generating $3 million with a workforce of less than 1,000 people, solely focused around Sri Lanka. So it's safe to say Africa has really been the catalyst for our growth. Over the years, we've kind of evolved our offering with design and innovation offices in New York, in London, and then the latest being in France, so that they are able to feed into our headquarters in Sri Lanka and the manufacturing facilities with the latest trends and designs. What has Africa really brought to us? Each country that we have a presence in has a completely different value proposition. From mass manufacturing coming out of our Ethiopian facility, supported by its large populations, and of course, global duty-free agreements covering access from the West in Canada. I mean, US used to be covered, but recently lost it, to Europe, UK, and most parts of Asia, including India, China, Japan, Korea, and even Australia. So for global brands, it's that ideal hotspot for one-stop manufacturing. Kenya, with its infrastructure, language, English is widely spoken in Kenya, allowing us to train middle management a lot more easily, and of course, much more consistent infrastructure helps us with operational consistency. And Egypt, with its geographical advantage and supply chain availability, is a great destination for quick response. And as you know, fashion is all about time. And with Egypt, we can access Europe within 3 to 7 days, depending on which part of Europe, and then of course the US within 12 days. Just to give you some context, when you airlift a product out of Sri Lanka, it still takes you 5 days, but we can do it in a lot more sustainable fashion out of Egypt by sending it by sea in just 12 days, and a meaningful cost option as well. Having entered Kenya 7 years ago, Ethiopia 6 years ago, and then Egypt just 18 months ago, we've kind of harnessed the first mover advantage, and today we are very proud to say that we're the largest in Kenya, largest apparel exporter in Kenya. We're the largest exporter in Ethiopia. In both those countries, 1 out of 5 garments that gets exported is from a Hela facility. And after just 18 months, we have now been placed as the 12th largest exporter in Egypt, and we hope to move up the rankings over the next few months. Below here, you will also see how our revenue has grown. And if you recall, we do $300 million now. So this year, Africa will account for over 50% of the revenue that we generate as a company. And that's not because Sri Lanka has shrunk for us, it's because Africa has grown at a much faster pace compared to the rest of the regions that we have a presence in. But when you speak to a lot of the apparel manufacturers in the region, you would hear mixed results on the experiences, be it a manufacturer or even a retailer. Why is Hela different? I strongly believe it was from our approach, and it was really built on a foundation of empathy. We didn't try to emulate what worked for us in Sri Lanka over in Africa. We didn't try to blanket copy-paste what worked in China or the Far East over in Africa. We first tried to understand the local context and then try to give bespoke solutions to navigate through that local environment. I won't touch on all the examples here, but I'll mention a few. One which will always stay close to me is Ethiopia. When the industry was starting up, there was a very general misconception that in the morning hours, your output is lower, your efficiency was lower, people were lazy. But then when we really dug into it, what we really understood was that there was a huge deficiency in iron in the Ethiopian people's diet. So what we did was we gave free meals, which was heavy in iron and other vital nutrients, and then saw the results, and voila, today it's one of the most efficient. I'm not saying it's purely because of that, but it was that bespoke solution we gave using a foundation of empathy that allowed us to unlock it. Another example I would touch on is of a freshwater program in Kenya. Over the first initial months, what we found out through our surveys was that our employees would walk 7 kilometers per day to get access to fresh water after their 8-hour shift. So what we did in return was we started giving jerry cans of water to every employee after their shift so that that water fetch is eliminated from their daily routine. Similarly, we started giving free meals, free healthcare, we have a creche facility, all with the mindset of, okay, how do we take off the burdens that they have in their day-to-day life so that when they come to work, they're happy, they're fresh, and they're focused. And today, our attrition rate in Kenya is at about 0.8% per month, and this is almost a 5,000 people plant. Industry average, again, to give you some context, is about 5 to 6%. So again, empathy and bespoke solutions cater towards the ground situation in the countries that you operate in. Touching on sustainable manufacturing, what we really wanted to emulate was that Africa is typically perceived as a low and slow manufacturing destination, so low in value addition, slow in lead time, and we wanted to change that from the get-go. So, for example, when we set up our facility in Ethiopia, we started making ladies' underwear, constructed, molded bras. That is a product that is typically manufactured in China, a little bit in Vietnam, but of course, very close to home in Sri Lanka. Would a normal manufacturer produce such a technically complicated garment in Africa, especially in Ethiopia, where a person hasn't seen a sewing machine, let alone, a bra potentially? But that strategy paid off. Today we ship close to 2.5 million pieces a month to brands such as Calvin Klein, to European lingerie brands like Dim and Etam. So again, bringing French European lingerie into Ethiopia and unlocking it using this foundation that we built. Circular solutions is, it's not a nice to have, it's a must have in your toolbox these days. And we've spearheaded that with Africa, with our Kenyan facility working with a Belgian recycler. So using all our pre-consumer waste, shipping it over there, convert it back into yarn, back into fabrics, and then back into a garment, closing that particular loop. And our next phase is to convert used garments back into fabrics and closing the loop in that manner as well. Thanks to the support of Norfund, we've also started now developing the regional supply chain. And we kind of approached this differently. The easiest would have been to bring world-class leading supply chain partners over to the region. But that would have taken time, and it might have not been sustainable because what's the point of having a complete international solution when there is good talent locally as well? So what we did was we reached out to existing manufacturers who were catering to the local market, especially in Tanzania. That was our most successful case. We gave them the technical input, now financing, and a guaranteed order book to help them elevate their standards from compliance, quality, sustainability, and then now they have shifted. Not only do they service the local markets, but now they're producing fabrics for the likes of Calvin Klein. So again, a proud feat for them as well. All this backed by ISO-certified lifecycle assessment surveys, where our customers can track the carbon footprint of every product that is manufactured out of our manufacturing facilities in Africa. Some of the challenges that's faced by Hela or any apparel manufacturer that enters Africa, and it is to be expected because these are frontier markets and you will have frontier market-based challenges. Right now, the need of the hour is demand security. We are living in an environment where there is depressed demand. So how do you ensure that your capacities are running at optimum, given that it's a very high fixed cost-based industry? Funding lines is definitely a major challenge, or has been, till the support of Norfund. And this doesn't necessarily relate to the balance sheet strength of the particular company, but the perceived country risks that we operate in. And this has now been unlocked. And then, of course, building supply chains. And like I said, building from scratch might take you 2-3 years. So that's how we've kind of mitigated by working with existing players and elevating them for international standards. Finding new solutions in this challenging environment. Supply chain is, again, like I mentioned at the start, something that we're really proud of. I'm not sure any of you are aware, but Tanzania, for example, is the 6th largest grower of organic cotton in the world. But the level of value addition that happens in Tanzania is extremely limited. So everything that's harvested gets exported to the likes of Turkey, to India, gets spun into yarn, made into fabrics, and then shipped back into Africa to be converted to a garment. So what we've done is we've started working with the cotton farmers, we've started working with the government to produce chinneries, brought in certain technical partners to work with local players to build their spinning technology, expand the capacity of the knitting, and then guaranteed buyback by Hela to manufacture them into garments, reducing the scope 2 emissions from a carbon footprint standpoint, unlocking lead times, unlocking costs, and giving supply chain security, which was, as we saw, a very important piece of the puzzle during the COVID era. Another subject that came into mind by Pia last night, where she mentioned some of the key things that you should do in a high inflationary environment. And we operate in countries which all are going through high inflationary macro conditions, ranging from official figures of 40 to 90%. Something which we did was we invested into technology. We invested into SAP, building a solid foundation for us to operating on, allowing APIs, RPAs to help agility and take off mundane tasks. We invested into automation by partnering with French companies like Lectra, where certain support functions, such as cutting, movement of goods, is completely taken out, allowing us to reallocate resources from non-value-adding activities to more value-adding activities. We are also working with the team here to work on local developments, because we strongly believe that we need local middle management and top management to be viable. And then, of course, vertical integration. In this case, we are trying to move more towards the consumer by partnering with our customers so that it gives us demand security, it gives them supply chain security, and end-to-end, they focus on the front end whilst we focus on the back end. So those are some of the solutions which we are working on with Norfund, and excited to answer any questions you may have at the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dilanka. And we'll also see Dilanka back on stage in a little bit.